David, when we spoke earlier, you told me that Yahoo executive were really determined to decide whether they were running a tech company or a media company. Now, why did that matter?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think a lot of companies here in Silicon Valley, I don't want to say struggle with that, but that it is important. More about the culture of the company and sort of how you approach the market. Let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean. I also work for Microsoft, and Microsoft is clearly a tech company. I don't think anyone would dispute that. And what is the difference there is I think, Microsoft leads with technology. They obviously have great products that, in many cases dominate their market, but from their founding and ongoingly, they're always researching the next tech and then figuring out that technology, what sort of products maybe come out of that and introducing to the market, like an entrepreneur would, right? I think Google, clearly you would say, is a tech company. I think Yahoo was, is when I was there in the 2000s, they were the leader in digital media. So I understand the argument and why people care, right? A lot of it's identity. And I think for technologists, they want to be part of a tech company. But it really should be irrelevant. It's focus on what is your business, trying to figure out how to succeed in the business you're in and using technology to succeed in that business. Again, I'll go back to say a Netflix or an Airbnb or Uber, right? And I think, yes, it was a discussion. It's a discussion that seems to always happen here in Silicon Valley. But I think what people should focus on, and especially if you're starting your company, is maybe there's new technology that got you, to come up with a new product or whatever. But at some point you are going to be competing in a market. What is your solution? What are your customers buying? And that's the business you're in.
We make this distinction between tech-enabled and tech-first on the show. And I generally tend to think that non-technical founders are really well placed to lead tech-enabled businesses because usually they or we rather have a vision, have an understanding of a problem. So it's usually some sort of business problem or a human problem, basically some sort of problem that somebody is willing to pay to solve.
Yes.
And then we use technology or, we hire people to help us use technology to solve that problem. But we can lead these companies because we've got the insight that really makes the money. And the insight, frankly, is not technology.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Would you say that if you're a non-technical founder, tech-enabled, that's really the way to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and quite frankly, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find many companies that aren't going to be tech-enabled or that technology will help you with a competitive edge. I mean, even traditional companies these days need to use technology in a way to give them a competitive edge. But yeah, absolutely. If you're talking to founders out there, you're either solving a business problem, staying on top of new technologies. The newest one is like generative AI these days, but staying on top of that, understanding its capabilities so that you can conceive of maybe new business models, new ways of approaching your business, your market with this technology.
And so now let's talk about your journey as a non-technical founder. So you worked in these really large companies and then you decided to set up your own business. Why on earth would you do that? After being in a really nice position where you're respected, you're getting paid well, everybody's really impressed. Then you start a company, nobody knows its name, you don't know when you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
What on earth happened?
Yeah. So the journey, it didn't, I didn't like retire from corporate and say, I want to do startups necessarily. So the journey is, sometimes you're lucky enough here in Silicon Valley to retire fairly early. And so I did retire from corporate and entered what I call my portfolio phase of my career. Started getting on boards. I personally, angel investor in the space I know, which is the combination of tech and talent space. So I invested in some companies in that area. We grew that company from less than $1 million to a $50 million company at its peak. We did sell it to Caldwell Partners. And so that was my first journey as a sort of an entrepreneur building a company. And then within that company, again, being a consumer of tech for recruiting and seeing where technology was going, which I can see with AI, that AI could do more and more of what the recruiter's job is. And so we started building software within that company. And then I convinced Caldwell to let me spin that out. And that is my tech startup, HootRecruit. So that's kind of my journey.
So now I want to ask about your original area of expertise, which is recruitment, because you have interviewed engineers when you were running HR at Yahoo, but you also interviewed tech people for your tiny startup.
Yeah.
So first of all, how different is that process? Big company hiring versus tiny startup hiring.
Yeah, for me, it's really different because for me, being at the C-suite or executive level, most of the time when I'm hiring or you're in the interview process with technologists, I'm looking for the leader, right? And so, and typically I'd be part of a team, an interview team. And so I'd have other people on the interview team that can assess more the technical capabilities of that person. And I would be focused on more their leadership characteristics, and other characteristics that make you a great teammate or an executive. When I'm interviewing for my law company, I do need to have some understanding of this person going to be able to code and do the tech, right? So, when I've hired, I've only got 2 engineers, is I have to lean on, their experience, right? Looking at what they've actually accomplished, right? So I may not be able to go and, understand their code specifically, but I can see the results, right? So what have you accomplished? What have you done? And see if that's good product, good results. And then, heavily reference, right? Their background, what they've done, and talk to their leaders, their other technical leaders.
One more thing I want to ask you. You told me earlier on about the Windley Rule. So tell the audience, what is the Windley Rule and why did it arise?
I had it come about. Yeah. It was, so I earlier in my career, I used to work for a company, Silicon Graphics, which, for a lot of your younger viewers may not know Silicon Graphics, but in the 90s, Silicon Graphics basically invented the graphics chip, the GPU. Yeah, so NVIDIA, which is doing now, which is behind all these AI supercomputer servers, right? But they were the first sort of graphics company. They had graphics chips, the graphic language. So very, very technical company. They kind of invented the graphics. So very technical company. I was an executive in, many meetings. And in one meeting, we had one of our product people kind of explaining and talking to the team. And one of our executives, the top executive, looked at the guy and he whatever his name was, I'm not going to declare his name. He's like, you need to be able to explain this so that Windley can understand it. Now, understand the context. I'm the human resources person. So from a job title point of view, the kind of the least technical person, right, in the room, even though I do have an understanding of tech. But the point was that you need to be able to explain your product, even if it's a very technical product, right? If you're going out to the marketplace so that a non-technical person can understand it. So that was the Windley Rule. He was saying it jokingly, but then it caught on inside the company. It was like, when a tech person is talking too techie to a general audience, people would come back and say, the Windley Rule, make sure that, Windley can understand it. So